Okay, aflatoxin. Okay, and that means it's, well, I should say it's a mycotoxin. So there's today, for some reason, I've got a lot of terms written on my piece of paper here for notes. Mycotoxin. Hey, buddy, long time no see. Seen you for a while. Mycotoxin, MYCO. That's a prefix meaning fungus. So this is a toxin made from a fungus, and you guys can read about these recalls. And I've got a bunch of stuff on my notes that I'll be writing down. So let me get the document cam going here. Okay, let me switch over to it. Let's see. Document cam. Oops, sorry about these lights. I don't know. Let's see what happens. Somehow, last week I was dimming them, and today I can't really dim them. They keep going. Anyway, aflatoxin is a mycotoxin, and there's about 13 types of these toxins. Now, the stuff I'm giving you now orally here is not in any probably of the reading. It's a powerful carcinogen. Okay? And that means whenever you see the ogen on the end, that means I'm going to generate cancer. Okay? Carcinogen. Especially in the human population. And we'll get into a case of acute toxicosis versus chronic toxicosis. To get cancer, you'd have to probably have what's called chronic toxicosis, kind of exposure over many weeks or months in a kind of a chronic sense. And I said it was a human carcinogen. It hasn't really been demonstrated that way in pets, and there's one reason probably why. Pets don't live as long as people, right? Cancer takes a while to develop. Remember radon, all that kind of stuff. It's very chronic. So I bet you it does cause cancer in dogs and any of our pets, but a lot of times they don't live long enough for that to be expressed. If you want to explore more about the pet and aflatoxin connection, Cornell did a lot of good work when there was the pet food recalls. They were kind of like the central part, and they were collecting data and all this kind of stuff. Okay, it can be found in corn, peanuts, rice, wheat, millet, and the list goes on and on. Okay, so I'll repeat that. Corn, peanuts, rice, wheat, millet. And the big thing about the dog food was the corn. You know, there's less and less corn in dog food now because if you look at it, a lot of times it says no grain. You know, it's a big selling point, no grain. Good, we're passing the puppy around. Excellent. There you go. And the common route of administration of aflatoxin is ingestion. Most animals, when they develop a toxicosis, it's because they ingested some feed that was contaminated with this aflatoxin. What causes aflatoxin to develop in like corn? It's always a function of sometimes pre-harvest conditions, sometimes post-harvest conditions, and it always relies a little bit on humidity and a temperature interaction. So you can have a crop that will never develop aflatoxin because it's harvested well and stored well. Other times you can have a breakdown in the storage. Another thing about this aflatoxin, look at how toxic it is. Remember how last week we were talking about parts per million, right? Some of the gases, parts per million. This stuff can be toxic at 200 to 300 parts per billion. And the reason there's a range there is because the data can come from, I think one source I was looking at where rabbits had a certain level where they were toxic, dogs are another one, but it's definitely very small. In the human population, children are more susceptible. And most of these symptoms are noted in third world countries where storage is maybe a problem. So children have stunted growth, liver damage, and then eventually liver cancer. So a lot of these, and that brings up the point, a lot of these poisons have a target tissue, and aflatoxins love to damage the liver. Okay? So I guess you could call it a hepatotoxin. This is terminology day. So aflatoxins tend to be hepatotoxins. Hepato referring to the liver, toxin is a poison. Okay. I'm going to get a different sheet going. Yeah, question, good.
When you were writing the numbers down in the parts per billion, you said 200, but you wrote 20.
Oh, okay. I actually should say 20 to 300. Sorry. Thank you for catching that. My notes, it says 20 to 300. So thank you, yeah. Again, it's from different data. And so if you do, and that brings up the point, LD50, does everybody know what that means? That's the lethal dose where 50% of the animals given this amount will die. Okay? Now keep that separate. I'm not saying the 300 is a lethal dose 50. I'm saying that toxicosis occurs at 20 to 300 parts per billion, right? I don't think I have any numbers for LD50 because most of the times those experiments have not been done with aflatoxin, right? So don't make that this. Got it? Keep those two separate. I'm not sure what the LD50 is for aflatoxin. Okay, so it's a hepatotoxin, so you get icterus. Icterus. What's another name for icterus? Jaundice. Basically, those are the same. Jaundice. Doesn't that make sense? It's going to target the liver and screw up the liver. Here's some other symptoms. If you screw up the liver, you often get bleeding disorders. Why is that? You screw up the liver, you get bleeding disorders.
You're not filtering the blood properly, so you're more susceptible.
Okay, you're not filtering the blood properly. That's part of it.
It can affect coagulation factors.
Yeah. So what about coagulation factors? What? No. What about? Tell me why.
Vitamin K.
Well, okay, but in the liver makes a lot of clotting factors. So if you screw up metabolism in the liver, then you're going to have bleeding disorders. Okay. So that's probably where you're heading toward. Taylor, where are you? No, we're right here. Can these guys have these things? Treats?
Actually, the last one we gave them, we like ate so far. He loves this.
Where's the puppy?
Yeah, she's been very quiet since I got it, and then last night I left her and she tried to so I...
Okay. Also, hepatic necrosis. Let's see. I got to spell necrosis. There it is. Basically, just meaning liver death. Other things that happen: edema. Why edema?
Wouldn't it be because if they don't make clotting factors correctly, then any small bump or cut can lead to massive bleeding?
Okay, that's true, but then that would be a hematoma. But now think about edema. That's the definition is what? Excess fluid collection, excess interstitial fluid collection. How is that related to the liver and liver function? It's a good little review on a Monday morning.
It filters it out, but it doesn't know what to do with it. So.
Okay, well the liver does filter, but it's something that the liver makes that under aflatoxin, the liver doesn't make this molecule. This molecule is very related to tissue edema. Okay, we're not going to charge you extra tuition for this, but the liver makes albumin, which is a very big protein in the blood, and it keeps fluid in the blood because of osmosis rather than letting too much tissue fluid accumulate. So, you're not making albumin, you get edema. You're not making blood clotting factors, you get bleeding disorders. Here's another thing. The liver somehow quits making cholesterol or lowers its production under aflatoxin. You might say that might be good, but you know, cholesterol is a precursor for all steroid synthesis. You know, cholesterol tends to be looking at bad, but you know, there's good cholesterol, bad cholesterol, but yeah, it quits, you know, so you're getting a big liver shutdown. Royal's working on his treat. No specific antidote. You can't give compound X to fight aflatoxin. Aflatoxicosis. Okay. Another thing, we don't really talk a whole lot about the diagnosis and the treatment, but obviously it depends on the level of poisoning. And that's one thing you should realize with all these poisons. It can be minute and undetectable, the poisoning. The next step, it can lead to death in hours. That whole range, okay? Depending on the dosage, right? And the animal. For some reason, turkeys are very susceptible. We also, you know, we said kids are susceptible, more susceptible than adults. Turkeys are very susceptible. And a couple, last take-home point here for this. When you have pet food poisonings, they're reported a lot less than human food poisonings. A lot of times, pet food scare or poisoning can come and go before it's even recognized. And so that's always a problem. Here's one thing you can do. Okay, that's pretty cute. The puppy's got the pizzle. I gotta take a picture of that. The pizzle's almost as long as the puppy. And it just proves, look at that, that is so cute. Oh, well, we gave it the pizzle. Do you guys know what that is? The bull pizzle? Maybe I didn't explain that to you. That's human food grade bull penis. That's been smoked and no chemicals added. Anyway, okay. So did I make my last point? Oh, no, here's the take-home message. Getting distracted. Since you know the pet food recalls are notoriously slow, usually, here's one thing you should have as a routine. Because you know when they do make the recalls, they'll say a certain brand and look at the best buy date or used by date, right? And sometimes there's a lot number on the bag. Here's what I suggest for everybody for the rest of your life. Every time you buy a bag of dog food or cat food, just take a little picture of that data. The best buy or the lot number, it's usually right there. And then forget about it. But if you ever have if you run into a pet food recall or your dog gets sick, then you can do some investigating, right? Just take a picture of it and just keep it in your phone. Because sometimes it's months later when they say, oh yeah, there was this pet food recall, or sometimes it doesn't even get to the level of recall. Okay, yeah. Okay, anybody have any questions on aflatoxin? Here we go.
This isn't a question about aflatoxin stuff and recalls.
It's about the recall. Good.
This is a shameless plug.
A shameless plug from
PetSmart employee.
PetSmart employee. Okay, go ahead.
If you have a Perks account with your email address on it,
Okay.
we send you an email anytime anything you bought, you'll get the recall.
Okay, so at this store, if they have your email address and there's a recall of something that you bought, because it's all in the computer now, they'll send you a notice. Okay, good. Excellent. But now remember, sometimes it's months later. You know, your dog could have got sick and died before you realize what happened, right? And so, yeah. But that's a step in the right direction, for sure. Okay, other things? Okay, here we go. We're going to the next one, which is a toxoid. Are we passing the puppy around again?
I'm trying to wear it out. So
Oh, yeah,
my
yeah.
life is
No
easier.
doubt about it.
Can we see the puppy?
Yeah, let the TA see the puppy. Now we're on to melamine. This is definitely a man-made compound. It's made from petroleum. It's a byproduct of petroleum. It's definitely a toxoid because animals and people have died from it. And you know, you can read the links I've got. Here's the chemical formula.
Go away.
C3H6N6. And so ends up being, there's a lot of nitrogen by weight. It's 67% nitrogen. So if you took that molecule and weighed it, 67% of the weight is nitrogen. What's the only nutrient given to dogs and people and cats that contains nitrogen? Proteins. So, how do they analyze crude protein in corn, for example? Tell me that. Somebody that's a nutritionist more than I am. How do you decide crude protein percent?
You multiply the nitrogen content by 6.25.
You multiply the nitrogen content that you find in the sample times 6.25. So when they do crude protein measurements, it's actually indirect, right? You do nitrogen, that's the easiest. Multiply it by 6.25 and you get percent crude protein. Now, what if you're got a little evil streak and you're selling some product and you get paid by protein content? And you know that people don't analyze directly for protein, but they analyze for nitrogen times 6.25. If you put some of that stuff in there, that's on the screen, would you get paid more for that same ingredient? Yes. And that's what's happened. Certain countries in the world where they're probably not as well regulated will add some of this melamine into, let's say, wheat gluten meal, and then when company X buys it, they'll analyze it and go, oh, this is a pretty good high protein ingredient. We have to pay you a premium because it contains so much protein. But it's a false thing, right? It ups the apparent protein content, but falsely. And so we've had pet food recalls. young infants in the world have died because some people have put this into formula. And it's terrible. Okay, so 67% nitrogen. What else do I have down here? The LD50. And I'll write that down over here. Now this is an estimate, but they're saying 3 grams per kilogram body weight. Okay, so there's all kinds of ways of depicting LD50s, but this means 3 grams of melamine per kilogram of body weight of the individual. I cannot remember if that was a dog, cat, or person, to be honest right now. The point is 3 grams per 1,000 grams, right? Okay. So you should know what's the target tissue for melamine. Anybody do the reading or know this? So we had aflatoxin goes to the liver. Melamine, a completely artificial product made from petroleum, goes to this organ. What's the organ?
The kidney.
Kidneys. Okay. So, knowing that it's a kidney poison, what's the technical name for that? Nephrotoxin. Nephro. Nephrotoxin. So melamine is a nephrotoxin, and what happens is crystals form in the nephron, especially the tubular part, the loop of Henle, descending, ascending. Crystals form in the lumen of the nephron, or the loop of Henle, we could say, more specifically. And that causes blockage and physical damage. Block urine production, but then also those little crystals can cut the wall of the tubule. Okay? So then you have kidney failure. Now it's not only melamine, but it's also biotransformation products. Okay, remember how we talked about biotransformation last week? That doesn't always mean liver is taking A to B, but in the gut, melamine also makes some other products, maybe the gut bacteria, and the melamine plus those other products cause the crystals in the kidney. Okay? Again, it's a matter of dosage, right? You can have a little, and it's non-detectable. And so out in the medical world, if something is non-detectable or not apparent, and it's below this line, what do you call that? Subclinical. It might be present, but it's not, you can't see it unless you do something very special. And then once it raises it above a line, then it's a clinical thing, right? Subclinical versus clinical. So you can have a very minor amount and have subclinical damage and the animal lives. But other cases it can cause death because you're causing kidney failure. So, let me just look at a couple of clicks here. We're right up here, melamine. Here's the pet food recall. U.S. Food and Drug Administration. So I think the last one was about 2007, but here's the kicker. Look at 150 brands of pet food. One thing you don't realize is how often sometimes this one ingredient by company A is used by dozens of companies, right? Or in one production unit, they make dog food for a lot of different brands. And that's what happened with this stuff. The melamine got into some protein supplement, and then it was spread around a lot of bags of dog food. Okay, let's see what else can I say about melamine. Let's go down here and see. And of course, almost any food. There's ferret food was impacted. nitrogen-containing molecule. It's a, you know, it's a flame retardant. You know, it's used for, you can find plates that are melamine resin. But of course, the resin is not going to dissolve, so you know, you're not going to get poison from that plate. Kidneys, yes, we said that. And then it's with this acid here. When melamine combines with this acid, that's when you get the crystals formed in the kidney. Okay. Okay, I think I'm going to stop there. Anybody have any questions on that? That's the line for the test. G126, Wednesday. Say goodbye to the puppy, or Royal, or all the above.